I don't know if you've seen it, but the map is up at the Nature Center. Did finally get it up there.
I think I may have seen it. I think I saw it. It was into the right on the kind of
Yeah.
lower down.
Yeah, we're working on a, because Neil Larson built it a table just for itself. And so now it's up there and we're going to get a legend with it here shortly. But yeah, it made its way up there. And the other one that you gave us, the concrete one, we are building an enclosure for so that we can do a water exhibit, like how water flows in our mountains sort of thing. So it's going to be put to use now too.
So you put water on it and watch it flow.
And just let it like go.
We're building one for the Utah Water Lab.
Oh, nice.
Ready to go whenever you are.
Okay.
Well, as soon as
Reagan.
comes in.
Yes.
So, yeah, that one's 12 foot high. No, not 12 foot. Sorry, 7 foot high.
Oh gosh, no, please.
It's going to be a little Leonardo.
Oh, nice. Okay.
It's all the watersheds
Yeah.
of the Great Salt Lake.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah. People understand how we're connected finally.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. What is it? Is this one of the things? Or is it? That's
This
ours.
is part of what Stephen had set out.
But is that new? I was going to say that's just what we had, right?
Yep. What do you put on the Google Drive?
Oh, so that's a review of.
Whole packet.
I think I saw the front and I thought it was a map. I didn't know it was.
I'm sitting over there, really nice.
Oh, it was. Okay, this is a separate part of the packet. Like one of the.
The section.
Yes. Okay.
Let's go around this way. Howdy.
How you doing?
Doing good.
I think you're.
Next, middle?
Yeah.
Okay.
Stephen, how easy is it? This guest isn't connecting too fast. Is it a known issue?
Or Wi-Fi? I actually don't know. I know the guest gets a lot slower.
Okay.
Y'all set, Reagan.
You good to go?
Yeah, I'm ready. Let's go. Sorry.
No problem.
I'm glad you're here.
Okay, we'll welcome everyone to the Monday, April 1st meeting of the Cosac. And thank you for being here and apologies for the belated start. Our first of all, is there any changes to the agenda at all, Stephen? No. Okay, so next item is to approve the agenda in minutes. And does anybody have any comments or questions on either of those items? Megan, I know at the beginning of the minutes, the first item where we actually approved the agenda and minutes at the last meeting, without objection, was the only change. Other than that, anybody see anything else? So without objection, we'll approve the agenda and the minutes from our last meeting.
From your March 4th meeting.
The minutes from our March 4th. Correct.
The other ones aren't done.
Yep. Okay. So we'll let Claire get settled, but our first round application, so discussion of the Furman application. And Stephen, did you want to start us with anything in particular on this? What would you like to accomplish?
Good question. So, let me
Yeah, I think-
display their application real quick.
Okay.
We're pretty familiar with this at this point. So it's 115 acres, located partly in Millville, partly in unincorporated county. It's the sections that are highlighted in red up on the map. Let's see if I can make that a little bit better. The yellow sections, the green half sections are already under conservation easement. 2 weeks ago, or about a week and a half ago, Cosac had an opportunity to go tour the property. And so staff, I created a report based off that, indicate different items of interest. I guess we haven't reviewed one of these like this before, and I'm wondering if the committee would like me to go through that report that I put together, if everybody's had a chance to read it. We just want the applicant to have a chance to address anything they've had or concerns out of the report.
Yeah, I mean, I would think it would be helpful to maybe scroll through, I mean, the part of the packet that I focused on were just the staff reports, you know, and maybe just touching on each of those main subjects, and if people have people on the Cosac, if we have questions.
For staff here, look this up.
The applicant.
Is there any problem with an easement that's not contiguous? And perhaps,
What would not be contiguous?
well, there's a conservation, it's the red on the right and the red on the left, right? So, no problem from putting a conservation easement together with, or does it need to be, can we ask that of Gabe and?
Yeah.
Would these have the same manager as the prior easement, or different?
Yeah, how would that kind of all go together?
So the existing conservation easement that's there is held by the Utah Department of Agriculture. If we move this easement forward, that would be a conversation with them to see if they also hold this, or if it would be held by Barrier Land Conservancy or by both the smallholders, which we've done in the past. As far as it being separated by that existing easement, there's nothing that says that they have to be contiguous.
Okay.
The thing that you have to look at, which we've had some conversations on with this, is making sure that you have access to all areas of the easement. So you may have to establish an access across the existing easement to the other portion, or find another access from the other direction. But in this case, it's not really far, and shouldn't be that difficult.
Single landowner.
But it is, that's probably the primary thing you look at with parcels that are not all contiguous.
I think it's a good point. If generations down the road, when, nobody here owns that, but there needs to be an enforcement action or something, it probably be perhaps complicated if there were issues between the two. It might be good to have them managed by the same outfit.
So what do you, let's see, what committee members, what do you think? Have Stephen kind of go through the staff report quickly, just like an overview? What do you think?
I'm more than happy to.
Maybe just focus on anything that you think
Yeah.
needs focus, as opposed to the whole thing.
Okay, yeah, maybe I'll just hit on a couple key sections within the staff report as we go through. Some of this was done through some of my analysis was done looking at GIS maps, others is our tour of the property and my experience working in property in the surrounding areas. So we have a couple key as we've considered and scoring an application, we apply equal weight to the following items. So protect scenic vistas, preserve open lands near valley gateways, maintain agriculture, maintains waterways, maintains wildlife habitat, allows public access, and also contains distinguishing factors. As we've met and reviewed this, staff has found that this property does meet several of the following criteria, and I believe and would recommend should score fairly high in within those areas, but we I'll talk about a couple of the key ones. So protect scenic vistas. One of the items that we score is how is it a scenic vista? Do people consider this area visually pleasing? Does it have wide access to the community as a scenic vista? And so one of the things we look at is whether or not it's adjacent to a major corridor, which in this case it is. So it's located right next to State Route 165 and has about 0.36 miles of frontage. According to UDOT, who operates and manages the highway, there is an annual average daily traffic count of 25,000 vehicles. So this is one of our more heavily trafficked roads in the county.
Yeah, if you compare it to Highway 8991 on the other project, it's only 20,000
Yep.
ADT. So it's more than 8991.
Yeah, and I think part of that, because that surprised me a little bit when I
Yeah,
was
it
looking at
surprised
it.
me too.
That one in Wellsville.
Yeah.
But part of me thinks that had a lot to do with 8991 is mostly commuting traffic,
Yeah.
while this one has the commuting traffic plus those traveling in and out of town for shopping or recreation or whatever other reasons
Yep.
for those type of trips. There is also, like I mentioned before, there's a master plan trail in the area traversing the property, or staff's proposal to go around the edges of the property that would also increase its scenic vista as people utilize that trail system for commuting and recreation. The next one is we have preserves open lands near valley gateways. Staff felt like this did not meet that criteria. Most of the areas that we've looked at, consider the mouth of Wellsville Canyon, Valley View Highway, SR 91 at the Idaho-Utah border, and even some of the secondary gateways that we've looked at, like around American West Heritage or the property between Hiram and Nibley. We didn't feel this doesn't fall within those geographic areas. The next one is maintain agriculture. As you saw from the NCRS mapping and to their own report, that 90% of the property contains critical farmland, with 33% being of local importance, 34% being prime farmland, and the remaining 30% being farmland of statewide importance. This is also a historic farm that has access to numerous water rights. One thing we also saw on the tour is that there are some good soils on the property that we felt like would add to its agricultural viability. One concern that was brought up during the tour was that it's eventually will be kind of an isolated farm as development circles around it that may have an impact on its long-term farming viability, which I believe is part of the reason why they're applying for this easement to help protect it. The next item is maintains waterways, and it might be good just to bring up a map on this one.
Yeah, I think the maps were super helpful, if you end up scrolling through them.
Potentially even this.
Wetlands.
Yeah, so this is the property up on the screen. Might be easier to show the PDF, but
That's true. Yeah, the PDF just, I think, only shows wetlands. It doesn't show like the FEMA floodplain.
let me pull that over so I can actually see it. So this is a property we're looking at up on the screen. And so you can see all this lighter pattern blue is wetlands. This kind of lightish color blue is waterways. And then we also have some standing water and springs also on the property that is shown. If you base off that analysis, we're looking at potentially you have approximately 25 acres of wetland along the Blacksmith Fork River. So we're looking at this section right here. And then we also have approximately 16 acres of wetland that are located on the west section of the proposed development. So we're talking about this area right here that's not already within easement. They're not already within the current existing conservation easement. And there is approximately, let's see, 0.46 miles of river. Oh, I zoomed out. There's approximately 0.46 miles of Blacksmith Fork River that runs through the property fronts, both sides of. So there is quite a few waterways and wetlands, and that was actually pretty evident as we move to the next section for maintains wildlife habitat. So we mentioned on our tour that we went through a couple weeks ago, I kept a tally of the different bird species that I saw on that tour, and I counted 15 different species on our 2-hour tour that we were on the property, which is pretty significant. And a lot of those were, wetland type fowl. So we had ducks, geese, cranes. We saw a herring, which there's not that many that don't dwell in any type of wetlands. And so there's also other animals. We saw a lot of woodchucks. There's also, the applicant indicated that there's a herd of deer that migrates through there every year, and that's something that I have seen as I commute down that highway. However, as development grows around it and the highway continues to grow, large animal migration to the property, I think, will become less and less of a factor in the future. Well, maybe I'll allow public access to be the last thing I talk about, because that's probably the one that has the most to talk about. Distinguishing factors, as we mentioned before, this is part of a historic farm. This was originally part of the first Elkhorn Ranch area, where the initial Mormon pioneer settlement took place, and has been farmed since then. And so there is some historic factors of this farm. So the last item I wanted to talk about with this was the trail. As I mentioned earlier, and we've talked about quite a bit, is there is a master plan trail that goes through the property. And I'll pull that up here on the map real quick. Sorry, it should be opening. It's a little bit hard to see on that. But the Cache County and several other cities have a master plan trail that follows along the Blacksmith Fork River. As provided in the staff report, as we did public comment during the general plan process, we took like general recommendations and where we felt like our trail systems could improve. And one of the number one ideas that came out of that was to provide a trail space along the Blacksmith Fork River. This river has quite a few barriers to completing it, a lot of property owners that go through. However, in this one section, the property owners they're limited in number, and we already have a few partnering neighbors who would like to see that trail go through. And this trail has been put as a Tier 1 priority for the UDOT Trail Network, or the Utah Trail Network that UDOT is building and maintaining in the future. After conversations with the applicant and the property owner, they have decisively told us they do not want to see the trail traverse through their property along the river as planned in the master plan. And so we're looking at an alternative alignment that would potentially fulfill the same connection point that when you cross over from the ridgeline and Nibley City property where the trail has been built, when it crosses over the highway, eventually going under the bridge that goes over the river and right there, that instead of continuing down the river, that it would continue along the UDOT right-of-way, and then cut up through this old right-of-way parcel and connect into what would then be the future, would be the trail system that would follow along the river. So really, staff is generally, we're okay with this as a compromise. We feel like we could achieve a lot of the same connectivity purpose. I mean, obviously, our first desire would be that the trail would be able to follow the river. That would be a better alignment. It'd also be much more pleasant and safe for those who traverse it. But like I said, we feel like we can make the same connection point. But the couple conditions that we'd like the committee to consider is that any conservation easement put on the parcel would not exclude a future trail along the river, and that the property that's currently the old right-of-way property is currently being farmed by Mr. Furman, and we'd want him to essentially agree to not protest the construction of the trail through that property. We believe as staff that Millville has the right to that, and Millville is supportive of that, of us putting a trail through there. But like I said, it has the right-of-way hasn't been utilized for several years, and is currently being grazed as part of the pasture.
If that's not available, would the property owner to the north be willing to sell some property to the county or to the state or somebody?
At this point, I don't know.
Yeah.
We've looked at that as an option, but we feel like where this was an old right-of-way and deeded to the public at one point, we felt like this was probably the best option. But like I said, because of it hasn't been utilized for years, we would just like consent from Mr. Furman, who's been utilizing that property, to allow us to go ahead and build that trail through that property.
How wide is the right of way?
It's like 30 feet.
30 feet, okay.
What is the length that we're talking about here?
Of trail space?
Yeah.
So the river itself is 0.46 miles that goes through the property. If we were to go around it, it would.
So we're talking, yeah, that gives me enough of an idea.
Yeah.
That's what I was looking for.
How long is the straight section along the highway,
Yeah, so the front.
approximately? And how long is the old easement too?
Yeah, we can just measure it all out right here.
Yeah.
So it comes in under the bridge right here. So let's,
Half a mile
yeah, about half a mile.
and then in.
Quarter mile?
Through there, it's, I'll say 100 feet.
Okay. So you're 3,400 feet, okay.
Yep.
Approximately. Okay. So it'd be all 30 feet wide?
So the trail itself that we're looking for, UDOT standard is a 12-foot pavement. Typically, you'd want about a 2-foot buffer on each side. So you're looking about 15, 16
8 feet wide, okay. And that would be right next to the Utah right away?
Yes, so the majority of it would go along the right-of-way. We're currently doing a feasibility study. We're supposed to have a little bit more information before today that wasn't done yet. But the initial findings is that there's room within the right-of-way to put the trail along SR 165. And so we wouldn't have to go into Mr. Furman's property in that point. It's just the big issue is just the connection from east to west to make that connection. Because, like I said, even though this is an old, you look at old. Sorry, I forgot my mouse.
So the right of way on the highway is gonna be on the highway,
Yep, it'll be within the right of way.
and then the connection part is the one that Mr. Furman would be involved with.
Yep, so this
Okay.
99-999. So this parcel isn't part of the conservation easement itself. This has been excluded from the ask. However, like I said, the fence line currently between the Furmans and the property owner to the north currently runs along the northern boundary of this old right-of-way parcel.
Okay.
So when we talk about a trail along there's a difference between a conservation easement and a trail easement. Would there be any entertaining of an offer of a trail easement separate from a conservation easement?
I mean, generally speaking, my first choice would be to run the trail down the river. However, based off the concerns brought up by the property owner, that's why we looked at the alternative. So if the property owner and the county,
I guess, is there an understanding that there could be an offer for a trail that could be entertained? Okay.
No, we're adamantly opposed against it.
Okay.
This is our property, we've got a right,
Oh, yeah.
privacy of our property.
Yeah, and I'm just saying, would it be would it, as a separate, totally separate thing, would it be entertained? But-
Separate financially, I mean, an
Yeah,
additional financial.
financially, yeah, yeah, because it wouldn't be the same thing.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, the point two being that we do have a separate program for,
Right.
that's focused on
Right, that we could,
spreading the trail network.
right.
I mean, for me personally, like, I guess I didn't picture this as kind of a land use development style process where we might exact conditions from potential landowners, and maybe that's just my head hasn't gone there before, and others may have, but, I think obviously if there was an interest by this applicant or a different applicant to allow for public access, then certainly that project's gonna score higher, because we're gonna give it points for that category, right? I mean, the downside to this is there's no points allocated for that.
I expect the property would score higher, and that might reflect the proportion that the county is willing to fund. So it's not a condition, it's just part of the valuation.
Oh, yeah, and I would consider it completely separate, meaning from the trail money that I have some budget in my mind, is there, on this good of a trail location, there would be additional consideration that has nothing to do with the
Easement.
a conservation easement.
So make it an
But then
offer.
I see your point of and that's a little bit hard when because we did ask what is on the county plan or city plans relative to a property.
Yeah. And, I am supportive of, let's not eliminate the possibility down the road, but that it's not part of the current project.
Yeah, I wonder if we're setting any precedents one way or the other.
The question I have is if this easement is granted on the north side, and the state of Utah has got the right of way on their property, then this would connect that trail.
Correct. So if we followed the alternative alignment as proposed by staff, we would be able to make that connection point.
Yes.
Because this will connect into Nibley's master plan trail system, Providence, and Logan's. And this will provide a vital link and Millville. So this provides a vital link to connect these multiple cities with an active transportation corridor.
And so that 800 feet is real important.
Yes.
All right.
And
Got it.
like I said, staff, we believe we already have the right to do it. We just don't want to have to fight about
You
it.
don't want to go to court for 5 years, okay. All right, but it would connect the trail system without having to go over on the river, basically.
Correct, if we were to cut through the northern piece.
Okay, that answers my question.
And this is contiguous with Stokes?
I would think that without the access on the north, it's not really a compromise. It's just a no
Yeah.
on this project, and you're going around it on somebody else's property, so, in that sense. I had that question on, the master plan trail appears from the map is running along the west side of the river. Is that important? Would it be more doable if it were on the east side?
It really, a lot of times when we're planning corridors along waterways, we really just we normally map it along the waterway on the GIS, but then when it comes down to where it actually goes, we just negotiate with the adjacent property
Yeah.
owners. And if it works on one side and not the other, then we'll go on the side that it makes most sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, on the west side, we saw the family campsite there.
Yep.
And that would be problematic. I'd have a problem with that.
Can
Yeah.
I comment on a couple of these conditions?
Let me ask first, yes, but hang on. Does anybody have any other questions or comments from what Stephen has highlighted for us so far? Or other?
Just to clarify, I think I asked the question before and got the answer. The river bank itself is excluded, not to allow development on there, but because the title of the riverbed is not part of it.
Correct.
Is that right? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, good question. The one thing I was gonna ask Stephen on, do we have, I think just seeing staff presentations in the past, using the GIS tool, what do we have for wildlife-related stuff? Like, I know DWR has some layers, crucial wildlife habitat is typically for, the larger mammals and that sort of thing. And I didn't know if this just fell out of all of those kind of zones, and so there's not really anything to report in that regard.
Yeah, that was essentially what it came down to, is I turned on, because we have some endangered species that migrate through the valley, and there's certain protected nesting areas, and those are all on our GIS mapping, and nothing showed up on this property. And same, we have some big game, like
Winter range and
winter range,
fawning areas and stuff like
yeah,
that. Yes,
formulas,
those
and
kinds of things.
nothing like that fell on this property.
Okay, great. Then the only other thing I was gonna say is, don't we have a layer for the FEMA floodplain?
Yes, and I can turn that on.
And I think that would just be helpful, for future, staff reports. It'd be great to see that added to the map or combined with the wetland stuff or something like that, or whatever you think
Okay, yeah, we could
is
definitely do
helpful.
that.
And how does that apply that does apply in appraisal value as well, correct?
A floodplain.
In a floodplain?
A floodplain can apply to an appraisal, because if you want to develop in a floodplain, you have to take extra steps in order to make it developable. By going through
Raise
the floodplain
everything.
permit easement. Yeah, so typically you have to raise it, but still you can't raise it to a point that you're affecting where the
Flow.
flood will flow.
Yeah, you
can
create
a
it, you create
channel
it for someone else.
Yep. And so there are a few restrictions like that. FEMA just recently updated their floodplain mapping.
Yeah, that's very new.
Yes, so as you can see,
Yep.
the floodplain does travel through this property. It follows kind of the waterways that we were looked at.
Yeah, and the wetlands, yeah.
Yep.
Which makes sense.
If you put,
Okay.
a question I would have, if you put a trail out along that river, you run the risk of damage.
We currently have that on the Logan River one. The Logan River Trail does hit floodplain occasionally.
Okay. How do you address that?
There's a barrier on part of it.
This year,
You
they
make
closed
it-
part of it.
Yeah,
What's that?
They closed part of the trail
Yeah,
for a
yeah,
while.
it'll flood over and then flood back.
Okay.
so you make it resilient,
Yep.
in other words, you know,
Yeah.
capable of being inundated.
You would
Okay.
know that better than me, that's your job.
All right.
Okay, did anybody have anything else along these lines? Questions for staff? Was that everything you wanted to touch on, Stephen?
Yeah, on the staff report, I indicated that there are some of the surrounding uses and future uses that I think you could consider as well, long-term viability. One thing we talked about is it is contiguous with two other conservation easements, one that goes through the property and then the one on the south of Stokes Nature Center. But it's also, there's a lot of floodplains to the north, but there's also master plans to develop that section into something more of a town mixed-use area. Same as you go south into Nibley as well. And so there are a few things like that to consider, but outside of the main categories,
Yeah, I think, you know, what's appealing about this is, you know, if it does happen and it's combined with the existing easement, you know, it's 175, 180 acres, which is a pretty sizable operation. And they've already shown it's pretty much, can support itself. So I think that's, as a, you know, it's not a farm that relies on lots of other properties to make it function well, like I know a lot of our farmers are dealing with. So that's great. Should we have Matt come up and, yeah, you'll have to come up and speak in the microphone so we can get you recorded, Matt, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a couple comments on the staff report related to the public access and the trail. And the recommendations here, there's two recommendations at the bottom of that section. And the first one being any conservation easement would not prohibit a future trail expansion along the river. And I'm not sure that that would be compatible with other funding programs. So NRCS, for example, has certain conditions in their minimum deed terms where they may or not, granting an additional right-of-way in the future may or may not be a possibility through them. And so if that was a condition of funding for this project, it may remove that partnership funding as a possibility for this project. And so I just want to make sure that you're aware of that.
Would that be true for any easement or just for trails or anything particular about trails?
So I've just had a couple of conversations about it, and it's, you know, we rely quite a bit on interpretation from the national office with NRCS, and I think they've addressed it before fairly recently, and the comments I've gotten from them are that when they've looked at these in the past where it's not primarily an agricultural use, you could grant a right-of-way if it was associated with that agricultural use. If it's not associated with that agricultural use, so in this case it's recreation, then they look less favorably on that because it could have an impact to that agricultural operation, which is similar to what Joe has kind of provided with his concerns for the trail going through his property.
Matt, can I ask a question on that for any future project we might look at? Let's say that Mr. Furman, this was of interest to him, like he was willing to do it. Could we draw that into it before it actually happened, into a conservation easement before? So it was submitted to NRCS as such?
Yeah, I think so, and from what I understand, I think that would be their recommendation if you were going to do a trail through a property that was under consideration for a conservation easement, that right-of-way be done and granted prior to closing the conservation easement.
Okay.
Right, the problem with
So for example, we'd buy a trail easement, it would be recorded on the property, then
Yeah.
a conservation easement would be applied over the top.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
yep,
Thank you.
yep.
Trail comes first.
Otherwise, you would have to, you know, exclude that corridor, which would reduce the acreage that the landowner is able to protect through the easement and, you know, further kind of take away from, you know, that being a whole property.
Yeah.
Right?
That's
So-
interesting because I think that shows a difference of interest in the two groups, that group and Cache County.
Yep,
Where I expect the Cache County voters would be a lot more interested in doing easements, not just this one, but anywhere if there was public access and a trail, and that might run counter to the purposes of a strict conservation group. So that's interesting to know.
yeah, and, you know, there's all sorts of reasons for conservation easements, and there's identified purposes, and one of those is public access and recreation, education.
Yeah.
Some of those are agriculture, some of those are habitat. Sometimes those things conflict.
Yeah.
With NRCS easements, generally their primary purpose is going to be to protect those agricultural operations and the land base, right? So there's certainly an interest in public access in the county. I think that's well established. In this case, the landowner's not looking to provide public access, so I think, you know, there is that ranking criteria for the projects and the associated points. So I think they're aware of that. I just wanted to make sure that you're aware that if that was a condition, it may or may not be able to run through as an NRCS project, right?
Okay.
It's interesting. I think going forward, we should keep that in mind, that the Cache County participation would probably be to further Cache County's goals in all of these projects, which are the list that we have here. Or the county might cut back its participation, so.
Sure.
These things will all have to be negotiated, and that's why everybody maybe kicks in some money, is to get some of what, you know, their constituents want.
Yep. Yep, and I mean, that's the trick with easements in general, right, is get everybody on the same page and figure out where we line up and where we don't.
Yeah.
What about your other conservation programs about trails? What's their emphasis?
I can't speak to all of them. I don't know what Lee Ray McAllister's interpretation there would be. They're often working in conjunction with NRCS, but I don't know their specific requirements. We also work with Fish and Wildlife Service, but I can't speak to their requirements either for this property being an agricultural property and a landowner who's interested primarily in protecting that
usage.
that farmland as agriculture and as open space in the county, then NRCS would be the one that I would see lining up to
Well, I'm a
contribute to
farmer,
the project.
so I'm on the side of open and agricultural use. These guys live close to town and they want a trail. I mean, that's where we're at. So,
But I don't necessarily see that requirement for that public access is a requirement in this program as we've seen it.
okay. Yeah, well, that's where I'm at, so.
So I just wanted to make you aware of that. And I'm learning this as I go as well.
Yeah, it's very helpful.
That if you were to place that condition on it, that it may not be able to move forward as an NRCS project. Therefore, we may not have the other funding to go with.
Right. Okay.
The county funding. And then I think the second one, and it's, you know, I guess as much of a question as anything, but that the property owner agree that he or his successor would not contest the ability to put a trail within the old right-of-way property. I mean, it seems like basically what you're saying is it's not his property, right? And so you'd either have the right to do it or you wouldn't. And I guess I'm not really sure what that has to do with this project necessarily. Or how he would agree to not comment or contest something on an adjacent property as part of this project, right?
That's good to know.
When
Is
he
he
probably
current-
doesn't own that
But
piece
does
of
he
it.
have, does the,
So if he's currently farming it and he does have a structure within that property,
that would probably be,
that's where our concern is that if we decide to put a trail there, that the property owner would then contest our ability to
It's the
do that.
contesting part, yes.
Where, like I said, we got our surveyor look at it and he believes we have every right to access through it. But
we just don't want a legal,
yeah, I just want to avoid the legal fight that could potentially ensue.
But what would that even look like? right? Like how
Probably
would he?
just an agreement prior to receiving the funding.
But they would make this funding on this property contingent on something that he may or may not contest on a separate property.
Yes, essentially, we just, an acknowledgement from the property owner that we have the right to go through there. That's essentially what I'm looking for.
Yeah. But then you'd still have to establish that right, and you'd also be binding his successor.
Right.
He can't bind his successor necessarily.
Yeah, I wouldn't think that verbal would move the needle one way or the other.
Let's say we'd probably, if this was a condition, this is the first round, and so if this is something that you would like us to look at, we'd have our attorney's office weigh in and provide some sort of legal documentation or agreement that we can move forward on. And like I said, it's not his property, it shouldn't be an issue, but like I said, staff's concern is that because it is that he has a old structure within that boundary and has been farming it for however long it's been farmed for, that it could potentially, that it may have some standing to claim that we don't have right to do that.
Is it the structure, the fence?
No, there's a shed.
Oh,
I don't know exactly what it is. It's
okay,
an old wooden building.
okay.
How wide, did you say it was 30 feet wide?
I believe so. We can measure it though.
Okay.
Maybe a little bit wider than that, but
Can you tell us a little bit about the shed? I'm curious.
yeah, it's just this little building right here.
Is it functional?
Would you ask me that question again so I can hear it, please? What?
They want to know what the shed is that's on that little right-of-way parcel.
I apologize. It's 66 feet.
It's a standard right away.
Yeah, so standard right of way.
Is that standard?
Well, that was built a number of years ago. It was taken from another property and reconstructed there. The person that owned the property before I did built that with his boys. It was a scout project kind of thing. It is in need of repair. I'd like to get a roof put on it, but if we're gonna have people in there all the time, that's not gonna work either. So I guess it was going to deteriorate and fall apart.
And what our plan would be is that if, when we did build, we just go right up against that northern boundary and just extend a fence along that section.
Southern boundary, yeah.
Yeah, along the southern boundary. So I don't even think UDOT would want to utilize the full. They just want to utilize this upper section.
And their standard is 12 feet, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, plus shoulders and
Yeah.
whatever else you need.
The
So
trail itself.
15 to 20 feet of room to work with usually.
Okay, that answers my question.
So I guess on the,
Would there be a fence on the 66 foot?
I would guess that what we would do is just put the fence along both sides of all the property that we need, that we wouldn't extend it further than what was needed.
Okay.
Like I said, I don't think we want to utilize the full 66 because we don't want to maintain the full 66.
You don't want to maintain it. You don't want to spray it. Okay. All right.
Matt, how confident are you on NRCS?
I know that's the discussion that I've had with their coordinator here in Utah as far as when trails have been done in the past and the answer that they received from National on previous projects. Doesn't mean that we couldn't find a way around it, but I think that it
You're
would be
talking about trails here?
Yeah.
No, I'm just talking about just in general.
asking about funding.
Just
Oh.
General, what do you think?
We would have to go through that process before I could give you a percent. I mean, I'd love to ballpark it for you, but I'm not going to.
Come on.
I mean, I think it's a value belt agricultural property. I think it's got a lot going for it that way. It will check a lot of their boxes for their program. But we also never know what other projects are being applied for in the same funding pool, or even what that funding pool will be, so.
And Lee Ray McAllister's thoughts here. What's your thoughts on Lee Ray
I'd
McAllister?
give you a similarly non-committal answer.
Do they have
But
anything on
those-
historical or anything like that?
What's that?
Does Lee Ray McAllister have anything on historical value or anything like that?
Yeah, that is part of they ask those questions in their ranking criteria as well, I believe, is that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
So there is something that would,
they have a longer list of ranking criteria than you
Based
do.
on
So I think they ask for about 15 different things on their application. This does check a lot of their boxes. But again, they only received 1 million ongoing as far as we know. So,
yeah.
Yeah,
we would expect it to score well in NRCS programs as well as Lee Ray McAllister programs.
But the funding cycle's not till next year now, isn't it? Or when is it?
For Lee Ray McAllister.
And for NRCF?
For NRCS, it's likely they would start, so you can apply at any time.
Yeah.
It's not likely that, I would guess that their application deadline for the next cycle of funding would be in October, September, October.
It's usually October, yeah. Does having those other easements adjoining this property already in place make that score better for this addition? I figured it might.
Yep,
And who actually runs that property now? Are you still running? Joe runs that property, so it'd be a combination.
yep.
You'd have an operator, I guess. What are the terms of the operation that Joe has? Does he own that property and it's in an easement?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so all right, so we don't have to bridge that gap of a different owner with an adjoining property. It just.
That's right.
We're
Yeah,
just
so
adding
Joe-
to that.
Yep,
And Joe runs it and he has the deed to it, but it's in the easement, okay.
yep. So Joe owns that piece. Joe also plans to hold on to this piece, I think.
Sure.
That one's already under the conservation easement with UDAF. We would certainly approach them about doing something similar to that easement
Okay.
for consistency.
Was NRCS involved in the first easement?
yes, they were,
Were they?
yes.
Okay, well, I like that. I've been down this road a little bit, and that helps, so.
Could this be pieced out in the future if it's under a conservation easement?
What do you mean by that?
Meaning,
Could the parcels be
could
sold
there be,
separately?
yeah, parcels be sold independently, making it less attractive as a,
Yeah, that's a question that I've had. So the existing easement, at least my interpretation of it, and I'm no attorney, the property is owned by Joe, and that is a separate easement. So I would think that that easement property could be sold separately from this new easement, if that's the question. As it is now, I'm not sure if there is a way that we could tie them together or not.
that would be
There
of
may
interest.
be.
in an easement, is there any limitation on the property owner selling bits and pieces of the property subject to the easement?
Generally, so, kind of the primary components of any conservation easement are gonna be limits on, or restrictions on your development of the property. But there's also gonna be limits on subdivision of the property, so subdividing the ownership. It doesn't mean there can be no subdivisions, but that's usually established in an easement document. And it's common to have the ability to subdivide once or twice, just depending on the program.
Okay.
So that is a common restriction.
How many years has the other easement been in place?
Since
2004?
So 20 years,
20 years, and it's perpetual forever,
it is.
okay.
Why wasn't this put in conservation easement at the time? Was it not?
Didn't have enough money.
You guys didn't have a program yet.
It's funding, wasn't it?
It was a funding limitation.
Okay.
As Joe's explained it, they had a certain amount of funding available for an easement, and they were interested in protecting part of his property, and so they kind of figured out what portion of it they could afford to put under easement at that time.
How has that previous easement worked out for the landowners?
It's been good, it hasn't, there are no issues.
Okay.
Yeah. The thing that happened, in 2004, the Trust for Public Land was here, and they were pushing this too. And there was funding available, and they were gonna lose that funding, didn't get an easement. Well, I volunteered to do an easement. So there was this much money. Well, we had to go through the paperwork and the red tape and everything. And we fit the land to match the easement.
Okay.
Rather than the other way around. Now we're trying to get the funding to match
The land.
the property. So that's how that came about.
Okay, thank you.
And so I guess my final thing, just back to that second one, is I think we would have to be interested in how that requirement was made and have a little bit more information as to, you know, what that would look like as far as what the landowner would have to agree to in terms of not contesting something on a different piece of property.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Is he
it-
paying property tax on that? You know?
He shouldn't
Doesn't
be.
look like it
Shouldn't
based
be.
on
Okay, that's
the
the
system, but.
one thing I wanted to know.
Yeah, that's a little bit of precedent, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
I've been down that road too. So,
Yeah, I mean, clearly we need council review on that, legal counsel, so.
Yeah, I brought this up, but we haven't came to a clear consensus what that would look like, but
Okay.
like I said, we just want to avoid a fight if we can.
Yeah, no, that makes total
it's not
sense.
worth it.
And I think to some extent, as Chris, you said earlier, are we conditioning applicants, right, for this agricultural component with conservation easements? Is it fair to kind of place conditions on those during the process?
But clearing
question.
up an issue before paying for something, I think is a little different than conditioning a trail on it. Like, this needs to be clarified one way or the other.
Sure, and that's exactly what I'd say as well, right? I think it would be better to clarify it one way or the other than ask a landowner to say that they would or wouldn't contest something that we don't yet know about.
Yeah.
Right, there's some title work and legal work there to be done, I think.
Yeah, I think ultimately, we're here to make a recommendation to the council, and we'll let them apply the conditions as they see fit. It's their
call.
It is ultimately their call, right? Thanks, Matt.
Yep, thank you guys.
So, in light of our time, I'm wondering, back to my earlier question, what do folks want to do? It sounds like Brent submitted a score sheet. Now, I don't think I saw that. Did he send it to you directly, or?
It's not to the whole group.
It was on the group.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
we've
didn't.
got it.
Okay, you do have it.
He sent it to everybody.
Okay. I just didn't catch that. I saw his email, but didn't realize there was an
Score sheet
attachment.
here with me, so.
Okay.
So, yeah, what did you have in mind? How should we do this? Fill out a score sheet, turn it in, let Stephen compile the information.
Yeah, can we, this is the first time I've gone through the scoring sheet. It is a little bit interesting because I think everybody is going to be relatively different. They could interpret the property the very same way, but my 60 that I've got is actually really good, but that might match someone else's 80. It just I'm more expressing that because it's something that I came across in the process of doing it.
I'm kind of in that range. I taught school a little bit, and I graded on the curve, and the students hated it.
Yeah, but
They were used
hey,
to
you
getting
did great. Don't worry
100%.
about it. You're an A. You know.
You're the top scorer,
Yeah.
it was 75, okay?
Yeah.
That's-
Yep. I'm
Yeah.
Yeah, so
So it's just an observation.
what do you think, Kendra? How do you foresee this going?
I mean, it's our first time doing it, so I don't know if we want to submit them or if we want to talk about them and see before we submit them, that we have a chance to say that my score is actually really high because of the way I'm looking at it, versus someone else's numerically is higher, but we're actually seeing them as equally valuable. Because we don't know how each other thinks.
And I did,
Which could be done now, or it could be done at the next
Yeah.
meeting
Yeah.
after we've turned it in and he has a summary, and then we can each advocate for why we scored things the way we did. But it's not, I mean, is it to be done to, just to understand each other's, how we got to where we did, or is it to persuade each other to, you know, see, change
to
scores?
me, to some degree, there's a reconciliation process of making sure I'm fully informed in my scoring process.
Yeah, yeah,
That's,
yeah. I think we should.
and this helped for.
Yes, no, it's excellent, and I think, I mean, I do want to go through that process as well. I'm just mindful of our time today, we have another applicant that we should at least go through that process and that sort of thing, and so I'm thinking, if everybody's comfortable, let's all fill out our score sheets and email.
One of the components that they look for on the application is what matching or committed funds you have. I'm not trying to push you one way or another towards a
Yep.
decision, but know that there are other funding timelines
Yes.
that are in play.
It's pretty hard to wait a month to get this type of decision.
Yeah.
That's not good.
I'd say, if you'd like, we could schedule a special meeting. 'Cause we were meeting twice a month. We could do that. And we talked about if applications came in, we could make that a condition, so we could plan to meet in 2 weeks. I don't know what that is, but we can meet in 2 weeks from today.
I mean, I don't want to be rushed through the discussion or whatever, but I also don't want to put these guys off for
I'm in
a
the
whole
same
bunch
boat.
more time.
I think
So,
I don't think we wait a month.
no, I agree.
I agree.
So it sounds like we're amenable to schedule the next meeting as soon as possible, and possibly in 2 weeks, I guess,
Yeah.
if there's not a conflict otherwise.
And at that point, I do think that we could wrap up the meeting with the direction that we're filling.
Yeah.
And that passes it on to the council.
Yeah, what we're gonna go to the council with in 2 weeks.
Yeah, so that'd be April 15th, so Monday, same time.
Does that work for folks before we commit to this?
The other thing that becomes very, very hard is knowing the value we get out of this, and this is something that this is the first, so we're working through it, is this a good value or not? Because there's no numbers that we know of yet at this point, if I
That's
understand
right.
right. So, it's the chicken egg thing. I mean, what do you go to Lee Ray McAllister if we don't know? Like,
Gabe, when did you say Lee Ray was due?
Last year was due July 1st.
Okay.
Yeah, that's when they were looking for applications. In terms of coming up with a value or an estimated value of the conservation easement, I believe that was detailed in kind of the phase 2 of this application.
it was.
So my understanding is we'd be working to provide you that value prior to getting that commitment.
Okay,
Oh, that'd be good, yeah.
okay, so you
So
could
that
go
would
to
be an
Lee.
estimated value.
Yes.
That would be an estimated value as part of that phase 2.
Okay.
Good.
All right, so that could we'd try to do that before the Lee Ray McAllister, so you could say, this is the amount
Yep.
pending final appraisal or whatever.
Right.
Okay.
Right, it would be contingent on the final appraisal, which would be before and after. But what we would work to do is to provide you an estimated value of the conservation easement.
So if we met on the 15th, that would give us enough time. The next council meeting would be so we met on the 8th, the next council meeting is the following day, so that wouldn't be enough time to get on that agenda. But we met on the 15th, the next council meeting is on the 23rd, and so that will give us enough time to get that to the council.
To get it to the council for the 23rd of April.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Another option just for submitting forms, if you'd like, I could create a Google form that I could send out to the group.
Yeah,
And then each of you can just fill it out as you see fit.
That sounds
And that
great.
way it's all consolidated. I can download it into an Excel sheet and.
that sounds great to me.
Make sure it's publicly accessible, so we don't have to log into Google and. all that.
Yes, I can make it publicly accessible with the link, so
Yeah.
that'd be pretty easy to do.
Great.
I'd like to express thanks for bearing with us and being a little bit of the
Give us some
front of,
direction.
Yeah.
Guinea pig.
I mean, part of me says, we came up with the scoring criteria to compare projects to each other, and when it's the first one, we don't really have that.
To me, it's almost pass-fail. I mean, you look at a box, it's not on the immediate gateway, there's not necessarily public access, so those might be low.
Yeah.
But the others might all be high.
Right.
That might be the best project we ever get in 5 years.
well, and I don't
So,
think, we said before, we don't think there's gonna be a whole bunch that like score, 100 is not
Possible.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think if you look at, for example, like a lot of the gateway properties, they're
They'd
not
be
gonna
0,
score.
0, 0.
Yeah, they're gonna have quite a few zeros
Yeah.
in them.
Yeah.
Potentially, or low scores.
It might be helpful if we turn those in, if there's any particular comments that you all would add if you've given a certain score as to what
Well,
was your,
do we want to do it after that discussion that we have? Do we want to score after that?
either way, or both,
Or both? I'll change,
yeah,
bring your laptop and change it real time.
yeah.
Honestly, I believe the scoring was set up as general guiding post to make a recommendation, so I say we score it and then,
Yeah.
based on the score and discussion, we can make a
I
recommendation.
mean, it's, ultimately, it's going to the council with, assuming we want to support or vote to support the project, it's gonna go with a recommendation to support the project. And here's what the score was, and for whatever it's worth.
Yes, no, yeah.
Okay.
We
Okay.
bring it- We bring it to that kind of a vote. In other words, here's the scoring, but we're encouraged that this is a project that the council should, and they've got a yes or no.
And we probably have 4 or 5 comments that we add to it.
Yes, and that's it. The council takes it from there, so.
Great. Okay, thanks for your patience and your persistence and your responses to our questions as we try to figure this out for ourselves too, so. Okay, let's talk about the Cooper project. Would you like to give us a quick overview on it,
Yeah.
Stephen, similarly to what we did for the Furman?
Yes. So this is for, this application is for 2 different areas. So there's 3 properties contained within 2 areas. There's one, within the staff report, you can see that I broke it down between the Wellsville property and the Mount Sterling property. The Wellsville property is 20 acres. It's the one highlighted on the left up on the screen. Located right adjacent, located in Wellsville, right off 8991. And the second property is 160 acres, located on the bench right above Mount Sterling. This is kind of located by the church camp.
This is the what side of the highway?
Yes?
So this is located on the
West side.
northwest side. So if you're familiar with it, I'll pull up a GIS map, but the Wellsville Pond Park
Yeah.
is located
There.
right here. And so this is located pretty close to that area.
About a block off the highway.
Yep. And it is important to note that they did, after I sent out the report, they sent in a updated comment about wildlife on the larger piece that I can address here in just a second.
Great.
But I'll go through some of the key factors with both of these properties as soon as I get down to my report here.
Doing the 20 acres first.
Yeah, maybe we'll just do the 20 acres at first. So once again, there's the same evaluation criteria. And so with the Wellsville property, you're looking at about 20 acres that's located along 8991. Within Wellsville, there's an average annual traffic count around 20,000 vehicle trips a day. There's also a master plan UDOT trail along the highway. at this time, I don't think UDOT has decided which side it's gonna be on. They're currently doing a big corridor study. It's on Wellsville's master plan, on the county's master plan, on UDOT's plan, but it hasn't been decided where that's gonna be. It's also important to note that it does have about, and this goes into the next one with property along gateways. This property has about 0.2 miles of frontage along US 8991 and does fall within that gateway area that we've been looking at.
That was .2.
Yeah, or 0.2 miles of frontage along. So just looking at this piece right here.
What's some of the local buildings around there that I would recognize? Is it open space on both sides?
It is up, it's definitely all open space on that side.
This is on the south side of the highway?
It's on the north
North side, okay.
side of the highway.
How far down out of the canyon is that?
Wait, let's just pull up my GIS map and we can take a look.
Do you know where the RV dealership and repair place is on the highway?
Yeah.
This is south of that.
Okay.
So you have the entrance where the state sheds are, and it's right around just south of the state sheds?
It's north of the state shed.
Yeah, so just right around there, right?
Okay.
Yeah, a mile.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yep, here's Wellsville, 700 south. There's not a whole lot of,
Where's it, let's say it's right by the
it's
state
right,
sheds then?
It's
right
just
here.
north of the state shed, so where the gas station is, where Maverick is, and the RV, it's between there.
Oh, okay.
Now, I'm seeing a picture here that has a pivot. Is there a pivot on that property?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I recognize it with.
Okay.
so, yeah,
You
I
know
t-
which one I'm
Yeah,
talking about?
yeah, no.
yeah,
That was that makes a difference to me.
the day I went out to take pictures, it was rainy and stormy and there wasn't much that you could see, so I went on Google Earth and had a better picture.
Yeah, that's
than
what,
I took,
yeah.
so-
I knew the property when I saw that.
Yep, so we're talking about these two pieces of property right here. It does look like, so the next item is maintain agriculture. These properties are currently being farmed for grazing, hay, grain, and pasture. As you know, there's a pivot on it. It does have access to some water rights. There is a trust deed that was included in the packet with Utah Department of Agriculture and Utah Soil Conservation Commission that applies to both of these properties. And so that's something that I'm not 100% sure what it is. I have looked at it, but it was included in the packet, and I felt like maybe the applicant could talk a little bit more about that here today. This is also a remainder parcel for a subdivision within Wellsville, so I'm not sure what Wellsville's terms would be for the future developability of it, looking at agricultural viability within the area. I did send this application to Wellsville City for their comment and haven't received anything back at this time.
Is the city boundary the black line?
Yep, so it's within the city. So everything on the north side of the highway is Wellsville in this area, and everything on the, well, south-east side is unincorporated county.
But within the annexation zone of.
Yep.
Could you zoom out just one
Yeah.
layer, get a position on that?
Maybe drag this more into the center so you can see. Yeah, so we're talking about these properties right here. Here's the highway, and the mouth of the canyon is right about here.
And then point to the UDOT sheds, right?
Where are the UDOT?
They're right.
They're like,
Right there.
yep. Yeah, so here's the parking right here.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay. I'm with you now.
a little north of the park and ride.
Yep.
A little bit further down the canyon, okay.
For maintains waterways, there is a canal that goes through the property, as indicated on the Hobbush Canal. There's no known wetland on the property.
The Hobbush Canal, that's not one I'm familiar with.
It's not an actual canal, it's more of a
Lateral, right?
drainage ditch. It actually originates up by Sherwood Hills.
Okay.
So there's not irrigation water goes through it in the
It's
summer?
not like, what I would consider, I've never heard it called a canal.
Okay.
I don't think they irrigate from it.
More like a ditch, though.
Does it get run off in it in the spring?
You know, last year ran all year, but
Okay. So it would have to stay open then, probably, for drainage purposes. Okay.
Okay, that's good to know. For wildlife habitat, right now, there's no known, any wildlife within the property. I mean, with the open water, probably are gonna see some wildlife. But since there's no wetlands that are mapped on the property either, so it's primarily used as agriculture. For public access, like I said, there was no indication of allowing public access in the application, but there is, like I said, there is a trail that is planned to go along the highway. That's on UDOT's master plan, but that won't likely utilize any of the property itself. That'll just be within the right of way. And then as of distinguishing factors, right now I'm not aware of any other factors for consideration. So the next piece of property that's on the application, let's see if I can find it real quick. It's like right here. Oh, right here. So it's this piece of property that I just highlighted. Sorry, I forgot my mouse and. So where this is at, see if we can zoom out a little bit to kind of give you reference, because this piece is definitely more isolated. But you can see here's Wellsville Canyon over here, so it's on the other side of the hill.
Is that a section or a quarter section or?
Quarter section.
Quarter section.
Okay.
And there is the old, if you're familiar with the old highway, the old Sardine Highway, it does go underneath it. And then comes up. So the church farm is located to the south of the area, or not church farm, church camp is located south of the property. And so once again, this property is currently being used as agriculture, but they've indicated that they currently allow for some hunting to take place on the property by permission.
Is there visibility of that?
So, unfortunately, I wasn't able to get out there to look at this one. Since we received the application, there is some visibility of the area, but it's not a broad. From what I can tell, it's not a broad visibility. There is quite a bit of steep slopes on the maps that I provided, and I can turn that on. This area is flat, kind of in the middle, but then there's a bunch of hillside right here that goes up quite steeply. Over 30% for a lot of the property. And so it is pretty steep. It's definitely up on the bench and kind of covers some of the peaks of these ridge lines right here and here. So it's not really, it is.
This all dry farm? Okay.
You do have a spring on the property, right?
there is a spring that runs seasonally.
Okay. Okay, there's a spring. It's located somewhere.
What percentage is farmable?
Oh.
Assuming it's this darker green area, right?
So I don't know what percentage that would be.
Got 30 acres in there?
I can measure it.
The farmland designation layer could give you, at some point, could give you a precise
Grazing
measurement.
on the upper side?
It's all grays.
Grazes.
Yeah, so about 30 acres,
Whoa, who
28.2
threw
when
that
measured
out?
in dark green.
Huh?
Someone threw 30 acres out.
I did.
Wow. Oh, you were off.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
Pretty good.
Yeah, I gotta re-look at it again. Especially that one little corner there screwed me up.
Yeah, how was it? Excuse me. So the next thing, for maintain wildlife habitat, the property owner, based on the email, indicated that there are large herds of animal that are herds of large animals on the property year round, including deer and elk, which is believable. It's also within the wildland urban interface, which is essentially the lands that are adjacent to developable property, where you have wildland that starts to interact. For public access, they've indicated that there is possibly, we currently allow hunting by permission. Wellsville also just adopted a trails master plan, as shown on the map, that there are a couple primitive trails listed. They're envisioning those as to be mountain bike trails that kind of follow the bench and up onto the peaks in those areas. Also, once again, distinguishing factors. I'm not aware of anything at this time. And then as far as partnering organization, at this time, no partnering organization has been listed. Other than, like I said, I sent this to Wellsville for their review and feedback for both pieces of property.
So I just have kind of similar question, like for this Mount Sterling property with the wildlife layers, was there no overlap
So
with?
I looked,
Okay.
and they didn't have any herd migration layer from the state that showed up on here.
Yeah.
Though I do know there are herds that travel through there.
Sure, but like what about like any kind of winter ranges or anything like that?
There wasn't anything on our GIS that I could find.
I was at a meeting with the state wildlife on this, and this area came up, and they noted that it is one area that they know there's migration, but they have never tagged, they've never collared anything in this area, and so it's known missing data.
Yeah, and I do know, for personally, I've seen elk and deer a lot in this area, so I do know they migrate through here. But I agree, I think the state's data on the migration patterns on this end of the valley are weaker than they are on the other end.
Great. Okay, any other questions for staff? Guys want to have the applicant come up and guys want to tell us a little bit about your project, please?
It is, but I can answer maybe a little bit better than he can, so.
You have to state your name for us, please.
Fort Cooper.
Great. What would you like to tell us about the project?
Well, so I don't know a whole lot about it, just that we were interested in establishing some sort of keeping the farm basically. So our goal is to keep it farm land, agricultural land. So that's, I guess, the ultimate goal.
Okay. And you guys haven't approached a land conservation organization or anything like that?
No.
To partner with and look for other funding and stuff like that, right?
Not at this point, no.
What do you have in addition to the 20 acres? It's kind of a hard area to farm that 20. Do you just farm those two pieces of property, or is there more?
There's more that we farm that is outside of this. These are the two that we're kind of more interested in.
I'm more looking at
There's none.
Sustainability of the 20 acres. In other words, if only that is under conservation easement, or part of the farm, how does it keep going as an entity?
How do you make the pivot work on 20 acres?
Correct. Yeah, I understand what you're getting at. There's no more connected to that, so, yeah.
Do you lease any of the property next to it?
We do, to the north.
Okay.
So that, the Maurice Pitcher land there's all part of that,
This one,
Okay.
all these.
yeah.
Can
None
you?
of the other parties are interested. Have you contacted them?
No, it's possible.
Okay.
very possible that they would be interested in it.
How many of those pieces do they have to the north there? Can you slide it a
Scroll
little
up
bit?
just a little bit. I'm not sure acreage wise, probably another 20 or 30 possibly.
Yeah, it looks pretty comparable in size.
More or less.
Do you know, are these right-of-way dedications?
Yeah, so that's all on the other property, but that's Wellsville City, so
That's what I thought. It didn't traverse your property, so it didn't.
they also, if Maurice was interested, then Wellsville City may or may not be, I mean, yeah.
How long has this been held in your family? This 28, well, both of them.
Do you know how long when Grandpa purchased this?
How long we been in it?
How long ago did Grandpa buy the land?
Oh, what's been out here with the dam, sorry.
We're good.
When did Grandpa buy that?
Oh, he bought it in
The lower-
1985.
What?
1985.
Both parcels?
No, the other parcel's been in the land or been in the family for generations.
Okay.
The bigger piece, you mean?
The bigger piece, yeah.
How important is it to you to consider these both together? Or if you got one or the other, or what are you thinking?
It's not, it wouldn't make or break either way, it's fine.
What comes to my mind is how, these are great, I love these properties. Are they big enough to put into conservation easement? That's where I've brought up several times, if we had an ability to purchase a right from the county perspective to not develop these without it, I'd love to find the answer to these type of properties.
I think it's a long-term sort of vision, right? Like one property or two properties at a time.
Well,
to
yeah, but
sort of build-
can we
build
even
it.
do this? Who's gonna hold,
Yeah.
who's willing to hold an easement on
Oh,
20
right,
acres?
yeah. I mean, I think, yeah, all of that has to be figured out.
Yeah, I know, like, when we did that workshop with the property in North Logan, that was the same size, 20 acres. I had the opportunity to speak to North Logan city manager and planner a couple days later about it, and they indicated that they would be willing to step in to hold a property of that size, and ensure that it was maintained. And I think for these type of properties, a local city or other small partner could be a viable option.
Yeah.
Our property is 11 and has an easement. I mean, it's a different purpose of easement. I don't know if agricultural easement requires more acreage, but
So who
Ours is 11.
oversees that it holds to the easement?
DWR.
The what?
DWR holds ours. Department of Wildlife Resources.
So the size, yeah, there's no standard. I think the questions you and the rest of the committee are asking are the same questions the funding agencies are gonna be interested in too, like how much property and what is the potential for
Did the Logan piece go under,
North Logan?
That North Logan.
is that one that already was done in the past, or is that?
So they just did the workshop with us,
Okay.
and one of the questions was who would hold the easement. And after I talked to North Logan, I sent it to him to let him know that it came through, and then I had a meeting with them a couple days later, and they indicated that they were interested in holding that easement if they did file an application. I was reaching out to the applicant. But I think that's an example of potentially a local partnership between a property owner and a city where they might see that there's some value to holding this piece of property.
Do you understand my question?
Go ahead. Okay.
Did you understand why I was asking the question? Because, like, so you're selling off an easement and you're getting paid for that, and then someone has to oversee to be that, yeah, you're not subdividing it or
Right.
building stuff on it, that type of a thing. And I'm wondering on this, Bear River Land Conservancy does that on larger properties, but my question was, who would do that?
Yeah, and maybe
on
that's
a
a
20-acre
that's a good question, is maybe this has other options beside the agriculture piece. You know, maybe it's more, the piece of ground is more used better for recreational or something else. Like, I guess that's something to be discussed.
Yeah, I mean, it falls within our gateway, so there's a scenic aspect to it, you know, that
The gateway.
we would love to
component is-
preserve.
Yeah.
And agricultural is the right use for preserving that.
It keeps it open, viewable.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about this project, they're two separate, almost separate project areas. Like, one is clearly agricultural scenic gateway oriented. The other one is more agriculture / wildlife habitat, I would think. It's gonna score really well for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, this kind of falls in between the, you know, a big city park, it's too big for that. And the recreation area, like you said, and it's maybe on the small size for agriculture. If there were some other kind of open space there, if there were a golf course there, not, there would be necessarily, but that would probably meet the scenic goals and would look good and would be open space. But Wellsville City owns property right next to it. Should probably discuss with them.
I'm sure they would have an interest, whether or not they have the funding or any money. It's,
Well, they wouldn't necessarily need the funding if they would be, for example, willing to
To administer the.
the conservation easement. Then there's the question is, do they change their mind in the future? Like, are they going to be like, oh, we'd rather see it developed in the future, right?
Yeah.
They've got a different interest than Bear River Land Conservancy.
Well, they would just
If
have
they
to
had an easement.
give somebody else
Yeah.
that responsibility, I would think.
Just for size comparison, what cities could potentially do. Are any of you familiar with the Firefly Park within Nibley City? That new portion is exactly 20 acres that they added, which is mostly wetland, and so they maintain it as kind of like a wildlife park, but that would be the same size. And so the city could potentially have some interest in maintaining it as park space if they wanted to, but that would potentially conflict with maybe your long-term plans too, so.
Who holds that?
It's
That's
just
the city.
Yeah, Nibley City just
Oh,
purchased the
okay.
property outright.
Yeah.
It's funny because this is a piece of property I've looked at and said, how does that work within this situation?
Right.
Does that like have a half pivot, a half circle pivot?
Yeah,
Okay. I think I've seen that.
yeah.
yeah.
So, a couple of thoughts, like, I guess one of the next steps would be to try to see if we can arrange for a site visit out to these properties. Is that something you guys would be willing to facilitate?
Yeah.
Show us, we'd have to hop between the two. And I think
Is there road access into the big one?
There is. You'd want to maybe wait just a little bit because it's fairly muddy, but it's a decent road.
Okay.
What about, have you thought much about partnering with an organization that, you know, sort of could help you find additional funding sources and that sort of thing?
It's
I mean,
an
I think the county, at least when we've talked in the past, and I don't think this is necessarily a hard and fast rule, but wants to be one of the partners in a funding for easements if we can leverage it that way.
Yeah, sure. Like I say, this is just, we're just kind of getting the rolling.
Yeah.
So we basically wanted to just get information, and
Okay.
so yeah, I mean, it's definitely.
I mean, it sounds like you're willing to, if an individual landowner was to do all the work that's necessary to put this together, it's not to say that they couldn't, right? But it's a fair amount of work and eventually a fair amount of investment to make it happen before there's a check handed over at some point. And so, anyway, it sounds like you guys are in this for the long haul and. are-
Well, like I say, it's his and he wants to keep it the way it is, so, I mean, at some point you can't keep it the way it is unless you do something different.
Yeah,
That's why we're here.
yeah.
That's why you're here.
Stephen, this brings to mind, and especially considering the time, the date that we were setting up, another landowner along this route was interested in meeting with our conservation organizations, Bear River, the new agricultural, remind me of the agricultural ones.
Utah Agricultural Land Trust.
Utah, out of the valley, Utah Agricultural Land Trust. I just was wondering if we could set up maybe prior to our meeting an opportunity for a few of these landowners to be in the same room and make introductions to a few of the land trusts so that they could find if there's matches there.
Find a good fit.
Yep. Based on their size.
Yeah, I'd be happy to set something up like that.
And it could be prior to the meeting and then, or something like that.
The thinking is, for the county just to do it, it's gonna be a stretch. But if you bring in 2 or 3 partners, then the money stretches further and your opportunity to, like on your bigger parcel, for example, if you can bring in some other players, then it works.
Sure.
I think that's what's gonna happen on some of this stuff. You bring in the land trust or all this, or NRCS, and can get that easement in place as a partnership, basically.
Reagan, I'm just thinking, out of the box here, but are there parcels this size where the cost of going through the whole process, the landowner may take just a little bit less, not to have the headache of doing the whole thing, and we could purchase an easement? There's kind of a sacrifice made there. In other words, there's not as much money on the table.
But it's because of the size of the
Because of
parcel.
the size, it makes sense.
Yeah,
And,
okay,
I don't know.
yeah, because of, yeah. Well, if you're gonna go through NRCS and jump through all that array of hoops, you better go gather up some acres.
Yeah, that's kind of my point, is there,
The larger parcel up on the hill, but for that 20 acres, an NRCS project, that's gonna be tough sledding. But on the gateway side, and for the gateway part of this thing, you're there, basically, so.
Well, is the county's open space just agricultural? Is that kind of your goal? No?
No, I think we're interested in other benefits, whether it's wildlife habitat, scenery, we've talked about those kinds of things, so. And then, obviously, a project that can tick off more of those boxes is gonna score higher in our program, but at this point, we're so early in the process, like, it's not like we're saying no to anyone at this point as we work our way through how this process needs to work. So,
Okay.
I think it's a compelling project personally. I think it has some great opportunities.
yeah, and again, I've wondered about how to make some of these smaller things work that are compelling.
Yep,
That makes sense.
yep.
I guess I had the question, looking way down the road, if that area around the 20 acres is all built up, probably residential, I would guess, maybe a little commercial, but how does this look then? And is it viable for farming, or being open space, maybe it would have other uses down the road that the landowner would approve and want, but,
Hard to farm, but
yeah,
Versus an open space, right? That's what you're saying?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, this idea of the local government holding it makes a lot of sense in that light, in that context.
I do know there was a property in Alpine that I think the city was holding and that was going up for election to put a paved road through it. Whereas I think a conservation agency that can't, it's just different. Interests change with the city over time, for example.
Yeah, that's true. So I have my list to set up a site visit sometime. We'll might want to look at the weather sometime over the next month and try to pick a day after it's dried out a little bit.
Sounds good.
We'll take a horse with us when we go.
Was there any other comments or feedback on that one on how to proceed forward?
Again, so appreciative of going through the process. I know, it's a stepping forward and helping us go through the process.
Can the county facilitate connecting them with other funding sources?
Yeah, at least point them in the right direction.
Yeah. It would help as much of that to be done
We've
before we
been
go.
working on putting together a list of other land trusts that will hold
Yeah.
easements, but haven't quite got all the way done with it yet.
Sure.
Right.
And kind of what their criteria are as well, like we learned some more today.
We did.
Stephen, if we could look at like 2:30 at the day, 2 weeks from today, if we could invite some property owners and land trusts into the room.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Prior to our meeting,
Prior to
is
our
what you're
meeting.
saying?
Okay, I'll see if I can set up within that time frame. Well, might be more realistic to try to do it in a month, but I'll see what I can do.
And I only mention that because a particular landowner mentioned in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
I want to catch you after court for a sec.
So at our special meeting in 2 weeks, sounds like we'll just focus on the Furman project, is that right,
Yeah,
Stephen?
that was
Any-
my intent,
Yeah,
unless there's any updates on this project, but I assume by then we might not have even seen the property yet.
yeah, okay. Sounds good. Any other questions on this project or our next meeting? I'm assuming we'll want to continue the other agenda items. Councilman Buse isn't here to give us an update with the council, and then our gateway categories is an ongoing item that we sort of used up our meeting time today already, so. How does that sound to you all? Anything else we need to talk about before adjourning then? Stephen, anything else?
Nope,
Okay,
don't have
so
it.
without objection, we'll adjourn our meeting. Thank you.